We're talking about enforcement. Okay, so are we enforcing, Peter, the rules? That's what David was saying.
The laws are inadequate anyway, but even those inadequate laws are simply not being enforced. They're not being enforced on the continent, but...
What are the laws?
Right. The law in the UK, the law says that every 15 hours, animals have to be given food and water. In Europe, that figure is every 24 hours. Those are inadequate figures anyway, because scientific evidence shows, for example, that calves and pigs need water every 8 hours, not every 15 or every 24. But even those inadequate laws are simply not being enforced. Now, the British trade as often likes to say that all the problems lie on the continent, but in fact, and they like to say that the British trade is squeaky clean. I'm afraid that's simply not so. The Ministry of Agriculture is currently undertaking a major investigation. They've looked at a number of British exporting companies and found that some of them, indeed, are flouting the laws designed to protect our animals.
Andrew, we're not enforcing the laws that exist, inadequate though they may be.
Well, I think it's not correct to say the law is inadequate. We have community rules on the transport of animals that cover all species, all forms of transport. They're very comprehensive rules. They don't say that animals only have to be watered every 24 hours. They say they have to be watered at suitable intervals, which can't exceed 24 hours, and we've recently made proposals along the lines that Peter has suggested.
So they can go 24 hours without being watered and fed? That would be within the law?
That would be within the law,
That sounds pretty inadequate to me. Yeah. Do you regard that as inadequate? That an animal can be forced to travel for 24 hours without being watered and fed? You find that acceptable?
No. No. And that's why we've made proposals to shorten those times considerably, because it's not satisfactory. But that, nevertheless, is a rule that was agreed by all the European member states many years ago, including the UK.
So that's the rule. Are we enforcing that? You're saying that's not being enforced, Peter?
No, it's not being enforced. And indeed, the European Commission itself admitted in a recent report that the laws are systematically flouted. They went on to say, and this is officialdom speaking, that the live trade leads to very poor welfare and often to high mortality. In other words, a lot of animals die during this trade.
Well, excuse me, you're saying these laws have been flouted about water. Now, I say you should have pounds on these routes, and the driver should take their lorries into these pounds where the sheep can be watered, and the driver has a card and it's stamped by the pound that he's called there. And
it should be happening.
It should be happening. And if the driver doesn't go there, then he loses his damn licence.
That's right.
He shouldn't be allowed to carry livestock.
John?
But the ministry take a long time.
John, hold on. I think we're just highlighting the emotive issue of welfare. Yeah. What we need is scientific evidence. And that is why some of the legislation that's going to cover the whole of Europe hasn't yet been completed. We in the Meat and Livestock Commission are funding research into the times for rest and water and feeding. So until we get proper scientific evidence...
What's the scientific evidence?
We
know, don't we, that animals need food and water
We know
and
that
rest.
they need food and water, absolutely right. But we don't know, for example, how long a sheep can go without food and water and rest. We don't know exactly.
No, hang on, please, no, you've got to be fair. Go on, Celia.
We've got 15 hours in this country before you feed and rest and water the animals.
No, let's get that clear. That's our rule.
Yes.
That's a maximum.
Indeed.
That you need, in order to comply with British law, continental law says 24 hours, but in Britain, you cannot take an animal, transport it continuously for more than 15 hours without giving it a rest and water. Though it doesn't say how long the rest has to be, does it? The rest could be 30 seconds. So it could be off the lorry and back on.
It is considerably more than that. But the 15 hours appears to have worked very well for us up to now, but scientific evidence might prove that take a sheep, it might manage to go much longer. One doesn't know. And we mustn't introduce too much emotion into this.
Please, one at a time. Come on, you've got to be fair.
This gentleman here is talking about scientific evidence of suffering. I've recently seen, a few weeks ago, 2 videos, one by Compassion in World Farming, the other by the RSPCA, of the live transport. Now, they're too horrific to be shown on television. This is the problem. You don't need scientific evidence to show that animals are suffering. When I've seen the things that I've seen on these videos of the most appalling suffering of animals, of them being so badly treated, it's unbelievable, of animals being winched into the air by their broken legs and dropped off onto the quay and lying there all day and all night, and then the film crew were evicted and who knows what happens to the animals. the most appalling, sadistic treatment. Who needs scientific evidence that these animals are suffering and the situation is totally out of order and cannot be tolerated in this civilized country of ours?
These people, of course, should be prosecuted. I'm talking about the length that's required between rest and water and feed. That's what I was talking about. When there's open cruelty like that, and in all legislation, in any human endeavour, you're going to get problems and you're going to get the odd rogue, of course you are.
You see, there's nothing to stop animals at the moment being transported from Aberdeen to Athens in these journey times and to be supposed to be fed every 24 hours, but of course are not. That's totally unacceptable for a live animal.
Are the rogues, is that part of the problem?
I think on the question of whether people are prosecuted, yes, the law is being enforced. There was a gentleman recently in Dover who was fined £6,000. So please, let's appreciate that the law is actually being enforced.
In that particular case. That doesn't mean to say it's enforced in every case.
No,
who says when the 15 hours start? Who says when this 15 hours start? They could have done a long journey or been on a farm waiting or a collection point waiting for hours before they'd actually start their journey. Who says when there's 15 hours? You don't need scientific evidence to know when you're thirsty. You want a drink.
The journey starts when it leaves the original ledge or inspection point.
So they could have come from somewhere else.
Oh yes, they could have done. Yes, and then they would have been arrested.
They could have left a farm in the morning, been taken to a market, been there all day without a drink.
I think we should appreciate that this is a big trade, a volume trade, and if we had done a bad job over many years, the trade wouldn't exist because our customers wouldn't be happy.
Trade exists because of money.
Do we need scientific evidence to find out when an animal is suffering?
No, it's common sense we need to use.
You listening, John? Common sense.
Common sense.
This is farmers talking.
I farm up in Aberdeenshire. I'm a pedigree breeder.
Not a bad place to come from either.
No, it's a grand place of pedigree cattle.
Don't you start charming her. Go on, my love.
You'll not soft me. And I feel that all right. Yes, we need to transport our animals. Yes, but what I would like to know is why cannot they be slaughtered in this country prior to going abroad? No.
We are the part of the European Union, and trade must be allowed.
Yes, at the expense of the animal. Now, you'll not tell me that they can go without water and food for.
That's what we're trying to find out. The proper hours.
Hey, well, you're needing to come to the farmers. Unfortunately, this reflects in the farmers. The farmers get tarred with this stick.
Yeah.
And it's not the case. Us as farmers, as that gentleman said over there that has the sheep. We respect and look after our livestock. It's our livelihood. And then, unfortunately, at the fall of the hammer, we have no control after that.
That's true, but there is legislation in this country and in the EC to look after these animals. The industry has agreed legislation. It's not someone in Brussels that's just thought up hours for rest, food and water. It is the industry that's decided on the legislation.
Well, should we take it out of their hands, Celia? And would the solution be to ban the live export of animals altogether?
I would like to see the live transport of animals banned altogether. There's no justification for transporting animals many thousands of miles in some instances. But at the very least, we should be demanding a maximum 8-hour journey time. I prefer to see the trade stop altogether.
A ban?
No, you certainly couldn't ban totally. Because it would affect so many people's livelihoods. If we're exporting live lamb to France, there's no argument with it. It's sold.
Hang on, please.
It is sold as home kill when it arrives to France, and as long as the French and the British farmer have this hate relationship between each other, the French housewife will not buy English lamb.
The price in suffering is too high. The price is too high.
We need to change responsibilities. We need to put more responsibility on the haulier. This idea of stopping every 15 hours is totally unworkable. There needs to be some sort of mechanisms put into transport trailers so that the sheep can receive water. It wouldn't take anything, really.
They wouldn't drink on the journey.
Hang on.
Well, the stress relates...
Animals do not eat and drink while they're travelling.
The stress of taking them on and off a trailer, as was shown on the earlier footage, seemed to be great. They were getting tumbled up and down. Now, if you can expect every driver that hauls livestock to know about livestock, it's a nonsense.
Well, in that case, that's a good argument for transporting carcass meat and not live animals, isn't it? If you can't provide the welfare conditions, then go to a carcass trade.
Nobody's livelihood need be affected. What we're talking about is throughout Europe, moving from a live trade to a carcass trade. Absolutely. Throughout Europe, there should be a limit on these journeys.
Can we go back to the lady from Aberdeen, you see? Now, she's a farmer's wife, and for hundreds of years, they're happy for the English to go up to Aberdeen to buy their store stock, which come right down to Exeter and Devon, and they're doing it now, and it has been acceptable and administered. Now, we're part of the EEC, and there's no reason whatsoever why the same controls and restrictions, without interfering with the free market, shouldn't apply between England and France, because there's only a small piece of water in between. Now, the farmer in Aberdeen relies on those people to go and buy your stock.
Yes, that's...
Equally, the farmers in England, with respect, rely to a great extent on having the same freedom of trade, providing we get the welfare right, to the French buyers as well.
Yes.
We've got to accept this.
Yes, I don't doubt that. But why can't the French, if they want it to be termed as French beef, instead of transporting them live, why can't they build a slaughterhouse in this country, their own slaughterhouse, and then take them across? Or if
Hang on. Why are you puffing and blowing, Andrew?
Well,
why not? Why not provide work for British workers here?
Why can't
instead
they
of
build it?
Tell my friend from Aberdeen why you're puffing and blowing.
There is a large carcass trade, but it's completely unrealistic to suppose that you can ban trade in live animals.
Why is it unrealistic? You just ban it.
It's been going on.
Passes an act of Parliament, and it stops.
It's been going on for hundreds of years, and the great majority of the trade passes without untoward incident.
Hanging sheep stealers went on for hundreds of years. Cutting people's hands off in Arab countries when they steal goes on for 100 years. But it can all stop. You can stop it.
Yes, but there's no reason to stop it.
Listen, I'm not just a sentimental old grandmother. I know what the suffering that can be caused, and we haul bulls. Now, I'm just back from the Perth bull sales. I had 2 bulls down there. Now, and we haul them down to Carlisle as well to sell at Carlisle. Now, you've no idea.
Hold them down.
Well, I mean, putting them in the wagons. I'm no meaning dragging them down.
It sounded like it.
Sorry, it's just a Scottish phrase. Anyway, we're taking them down there to Carlisle to sell at the pedigree sales. Now, they're travelling under first-class conditions and being looked after in first-class conditions. And yet you have no idea, just because they're being treated like that, there is still can be an element of stress in that animal and can lose weight in that short journey owing to stress.
Transport's nearly always stressful for animals.
Yes, it is. But
so why don't we ban it?
That's why we should ban it. Why we need carcass trade. Why should people in other countries have the money from the leather, the offal, the things that the byproducts that are made from it?
Yes, but the stress
and that's what it's all about. It's finance.
The stress of transport is not affected by crossing a frontier.
It's
affected by other factors.
Just carry on. Sorry, go on. No, go on. You're right.
I'm in the meat trade, and if the animals are, I agree with banning animals for export. But if the animals that are being exported, if they're in that bad a condition when they arrive at the other end of the journey, they're not much use to the butcher or anybody else. And I cannot feel that there may be instances occasionally of animals being damaged and hurt and that, but it's a valuable cargo they're carrying, and I'm sure there's a lot of emotion here today about it. And the big fear is, are they being travelling badly? And the next big fear is, are they being slaughtered badly? So I do agree with the...
But for the moment, you're saying that they're important, they're a valuable cargo. Leave aside all sentimentality and emotion. It's in the interests of the haulier and the recipients the other end to make sure that animal travels well. And the evidence is, if you forgive me, is in the eating, Celia. The animal's in fine condition, he says. When it arrives, it can't be stressed, it can't be...
I'm sorry, I think on this you're either on one side of the fence or the other. You either care about how animals are transported and slaughtered, or, you think about the money of it. There you are, you're either on one side of the fence or the other, and I don't really...
In Scotland on an overcrowded train, right? You can be harassed and very tired at the end of your journey too.
But you can do something about it. You can get off that train if you want to.
I feel there's a lot of emotion, but it's a valuable cargo. If it's damaged at the end of the cargo, it'll stop.
My friend raised the problem. It's not just travelling, it's what happens to them there. How are they treated in the foreign abattoirs?
Well, CIWF, Compassion in Wild Farming, have found some horrific instances of animals being very badly treated in the abattoirs. They're not stunned before they're slaughtered. They're using a thing like a screwdriver.
Where are we talking about?
This is particularly Spain, which may be particularly
And we export animals live to Spain.
We export animals live to Spain. Despite all the evidence, our supine government refuses to take the necessary action and stop at least the trade to Spain until we can be absolutely certain that conditions are improved.
Are they bad in Spain?
I think so. I think in Spain we've got a different...
You're Spanish, you
Yeah, I
should
am
know.
Spanish, yes. Well, I'm talking personally. I think in Spain we've got a different culture. We think differently than the English people, for example. And the way we are brought up, we've got different values. And I'm not saying that Spanish people are not bad or they don't have feelings, but they care more for other things than for animals.
They care more for children.
Yes, for children,
I mean
for old
yeah,
people.
yeah.
It's another culture.
But that doesn't mean to say you can't care for animals because you care for children. Usually people who are sensitive and compassionate and understanding for one thing don't suddenly take away that compassion when it applies to something else, do they?
No, yeah, you're right. But still, they care more for the old people than for the animals.
Okay.
The animals are like, they've got less value for them.
Okay, so so leaving that to one side, and the Spanish, and I've seen it at first-hand evidence, they do have a great deal of compassion for children and for old people, more than we do in this country.
Yeah,
but I've
maybe.
also seen at first-hand experience that they have the way in which they treat their animals. Why do they treat their animals so badly? Why do they kill them so inhumanely in the abattoirs?
Well, I don't know that. I don't know why they do it, but it's something in the culture.
Is the French any better?
Well,
French
I guess the French are a bit better, but we are not the best, that's for sure. And I think we are talking about Europe and everything and about these hours for transport. And something I really wanted to say, for example, you say 15 hours in England and then 24 hours in France, for example. I think it sounds so amazingly stupid to me because I think an animal who is in England, in Spain or in Italy, they need 15 hours and then 24 hours. I think an animal, wherever he's going
needs
to
what
be,
it needs.
needs what it needs
Yeah.
first. And second, I think in France we are really concerned about animals because we love them. And we've got a lot of association who do a lot for this.
And yet when British lorries with livestock arrive at French ports and your farmers, as they seem to be every other day, are up in arms and rioting, they just pull the sheep out and they just throw them down the street.
Yeah,
Have we seen them burn them?
I burned them.
Yeah, I agree with this.
So what we're talking about, and both of you there, in a very reasonable and fair-minded way, talking from your own experience about your own countries, you have in fact confirmed the anxieties of people like Celia and Peter who say, well, we treat animals differently in Britain. Perhaps we're more sentimental. Perhaps we're more stupid. Does it matter? And you're saying, and we don't want them to go abroad live because they'll be maltreated. And you're both saying, yeah, it's true because we've got different values.
Yeah, I agree completely that we should, for example, the English lamb who's imported in France should be slaughtered here in England. I completely agree to this.
Why do you agree?
Because they don't have all this trouble with transport. They don't have to fight to arrive there. They get killed here in the farm where they've been raised up, and it sounds a bit sentimental, I know, but I think that would be the best.
What?
Why are we worried about
Is it the foreigners' fault then?
No, I don't mean the people here, but you English on the whole, you're a load of hypocrites. You go down to Spain and you condemn the Spaniards for bullfighting. At least that bull can take somebody with it. It often does. I think that your lady will agree with me, it does. We put these poor little animals on trucks. We send them off. You grab the money in your little hands, you farmers that might be watching. Take the money in your little hands. You say, ta-da sheep, ta-da lambs. I don't care whether you suffer or not. You know, it's not my problem. You sold them.
I'd like to come in on this point about hypocrisy. I think there's a difference between hypocrisy and inconsistent behaviour. The British public, the viewers out there, care, typically. There are a lot of people in France, Spain, and around Europe who care. There's a difference between caring for something and behaving in that manner.
Hang on.
No, and I'm continuing this.
Come on.
If you care for something, to put those cares into action, you need to be informed about where an animal was raised, where it was slaughtered. You need also to have the option.
Yes.
You don't have the option if the product isn't labelled. So a French consumer buying a French product, inverted commas,
Thinks it's French.
thinks it's French, and it's not. It's an animal that suffered. If the travelling conditions were shown, if the labelling was there, if a consistent European structure of legislation existed, then perhaps we'd see an end to the suffering. And that is not hypocrisy, asking for that. And I don't think the viewers would like to be called hypocrites
I'm
either.
sorry, but that is my feeling. How many people here said to colleagues, did you see that programme the other night on the animals? And
It's the World in Action programme, yeah.
And the people I've spoken to, they've turned around and they said, I'm sorry, I couldn't watch it, I had to turn it off. And that is the whole attitude of the British public.
It's not necessarily
Stick your head in the ground.
I didn't watch it. I did watch that programme the other night, but I came here today simply because I feel so strongly about animals, and I always have. No, there are lots of people who didn't watch it, and there are lots of people with the same point of view as me. Any animal in this country which has to go to slaughter, I think should die humanely and with dignity, because we owe it that much. We're supposed to be so British, we're supposed to be so civilised, but we're not when it comes to it. I take your point, but if we don't do something, if we don't, as a lady over there said this morning, shift the first stone, we'll never move a mountain. And it just goes on.
We're not just talking also about the animals that go to slaughter. How about the veal calves?
Absolutely.
That end up in crates.
Right.
Our farmers are actually raising these animals. We've outlined veal crates in this country, outlawed them in this country, and yet we export these calves. They end up in France or Holland in crates where they live in tiny.
So I see. So this is part of the hypocrisy. We're saying we don't do this, and yet we're exporting the calves in small crates, go to Holland, fattened up, killed, brought back, and we're eating them.
Yes.
Well, don't eat
yes,
veal.
we're absolutely.
I don't eat veal. Don't eat veal.
Well, people who are aware of how veal is actually raised won't eat it. But it's this general awareness. We've got to raise general education and awareness.
Is there a problem with the abattoirs in France, in Spain, in other countries, Alan?
Yes, I've been in abattoirs in Spain and in France, and the conditions seem to be more or less the same.
Well, we all belong to the EC. They're always telling us we've got to raise our standards, improve the quality of our drinking water, improve our beaches. We've got all these environmental health officers crawling over all our abattoirs, telling us what to do in our shops, not smoke cigarettes behind bars in pubs. What do you mean? They're not doing the same.
No, the problem is it's a problem of supervision. The people in the abattoirs have a certain amount of tasks to perform on each animal that goes through. And if they can not perform one of these tasks, then it makes things go through quicker. And they're usually on a bonus scheme or piecework. So the stunning, which they see as unnecessary because they're going to cut its throat in a few minutes anyway. So I've seen it where they just do not get stunned. They're hung up, and then when they've got 10 or 15 hung up, they go along and cut all the throats.
John,
I think
you should, John.
Say something?
And yet I've just come back
I've got
from
two
Europe.
bits here. I don't mind which of you speak.
I've just come back from Europe. I've been looking at abattoirs in France and Germany, Belgium and Holland. And I don't see the picture that's being painted here today. I think British are self-congratulatory, quite honestly. And I think there are good things going on, both hygiene-wise and welfare-wise, in the continent as well as in Britain. So we've joined this European Union. It's a trading union. We must go forward.
Sorry, I wasn't meaning to stop you, John.
John, I'm a lorry driver. I'm a lorry driver,
Right.
and I worked in an abattoir in Kent, and they still kill them now, or don't kill them before they cut their throat. They don't. I've seen them actually not stun them.
Well,
they put a chain round their leg.
You're talking about Britain now?
Yes, they put it, and this is not long ago. And I've seen them put a chain round their leg, iced them up, and when they've gone round on the rack, what they go round on, then they cut their throat.
Yeah. These things are
and also
prosecuted.
Yeah. Now let me carry on.
Did you report us?
No.
Well, you're to blame.
I work.
But hang on, listen, my friend. If you walk on the other side, evil only prospers when good men don't do anything.
Yeah. Can I tell you what it done to me? I spent
but you've got to report
most of my
haven't you?
life in the army, and I walked out of that place, and I cried because that really got to me, and it gets to me now.
But if you,
and I'm a lorry driver,
okay.
I've seen them.
But
I've
if you
seen
felt
sheep.
that strongly, you've got to stop it. And the only way to stop it is for somebody to have the courage of their convictions and to go and report it. That's illegal.
Yes,
would you have reported it,
Yes,
John?
I would have.
Yes,
Well,
and
he
I'll
works
give
in
you
the
another
industry.
example. I'm a lorry driver now. I've driven behind a lorry, a treble deck lorry, where the sheep have come over the top deck on the M25, and we've had to chase two sheep with broken legs. And you know what the driver's done? Thrown them over the side. And we've rung the police up, and the police don't really want to know. We've chased them down the road. where they've come over the top, where they haven't got a net or a roof. And it's frightening.
Another thing is, it's all very well going to these abattoirs. It's an officially arranged visit. Of course everything's going to be all right. I mean, in our office, if we've got the auditors come in, I work just a clerical officer, everything's done right because the auditor's coming in. But when he's not
done
there,
right before he comes.
not necessarily. But it's obvious, if there's going to be an official visit, everything's going to be tidied up, neatened up. People are going to do exactly what they should do, as they should do it. But when there's no one around, that's when standards slip.
My visit wasn't an officially organised one at all. I dropped in various abattoirs in these 4 countries.
And you're saying from your experience, which I can't understand. You see, I'm the impartial, kind of dispassionate, rational, reasonable man here, and I've got 2 honest men either side of me, Alan and John. And the one says, I'm there, I've had experience, I drop in, and everything's fine. And the other man says, I've been there, and it's terrible, and it's disgusting. Who am I to believe?
Well, I find methods are different abroad, but the end results are just as good.
Should it be getting better when we're now part of the EC, do you think? Do you think this is membership of the EC going to make it all easier in the end, because we're going to all have to conform to the same standards?
I think the EC have got to conform to us. And I talk with authority. I'm a livestock farmer. I take my animals in to be slaughtered. They're half an hour journey time from home to slaughter. I sell the meat on farm. I do it with free-range cattle, free-range lamb and free-range pork. It's hard work. It's a growing market. But what I really think has got to happen is the housewife's got to vote with her pocket and go in the supermarkets and ask for meat that is welfare friendly or organic if you can get it. Because organic standards are quite high, or very high. You'll know it's welfare friendly. Vote with your pocket.
I think a key point is that legislation is only there to achieve something. If it's impossible to enforce, the customer's got to exercise choice. We've seen it with eggs. We've seen it in a range of areas with other forms of food and products. And that is a key way to go forward.
I'm a Welsh livestock farmer. And I can tell you that all livestock farmers in Wales care passionately about the production of their sheep. They care after they leave the farm as well. But also, it's a vital importance to the economy of Wales, the live export of lambs at this point of time. It's increased over the past 2 or 3 years, and it's improved the profitability of the industry, which helps the economy of Wales immensely. And can I say that I was on a coach on a ferry in Portsmouth in October, and I saw 2 loads of lambs coming in lorries on that same day. They pulled up alongside the coach, and I could see clearly into those lorries. They were divided into pens, and they were very, very comfortable. I have experience. I know when an animal is suffering or not, because I've been producing sheep all my life. These animals were sectioned in the lorries. They were comfortable and happy. They had priority to go onto the ferry. They had priority to go onto the ferry so that they could be first off on the other end. They were being cared for, and as far as I'm concerned, a great many of the sheep that are exported are treated properly.
Shouldn't your animals be killed near to home? And one of the big problems we've got in this country, one of the big problems we've got into this country is the fact that there's been so many slaughterhouses closed down.
That's quite right. In an ideal world, we would welcome perhaps that the lambs would be all slaughtered in this country. But the economic facts are that there is a very strong demand for live lambs into the other European countries. And why can't we have that? What we have to see is that the regulations are enforced correctly. They're in place. They must be enforced. The culprits must be punished severely.
How is all this going to end, Celia?
Well,
I mean, what's
it's
the answer
down
to all
the
of this?
public. We have got to... The public must be made aware of the cruelty that's going on, but the thing is that the films are so disgusting they can't be shown on television. Please take our word for it. It's appalling. It's the worst cruelty I've seen in 30 years of animal welfare.
We've got to bring together producers and consumers. That's where things go wrong. The moment the markets get spread out, however wide, whether it's Europe or whatever, it spreads out, and we break that link between producers and consumers.
In the end, it's down to you. You're the consumer. You have the power. See you in the morning.